understand demons nor angels other than they exist.
And it's okay to say, I don't know.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And unfortunately, there are some people out there that can't say, I don't know.
Right.
I think it's okay for us to say that. I don't know.
Right. It is. Kevin, would you have something else?
No, Louise was.
Louise did. Okay.
Although we know that God buried Moses and took him home, so we do know Moses went to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
But Moses did a great thing by, he hit the rock and said, speaking to it, and God went ahead and allowed the water to come.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't do what God said. So he said, you can't go into the
Right.
promised land.
Right.
So I'm just saying, maybe there's a little parallel there, that there's people who...
There's a huge parallel there.
There's people who truly think that they did something great for the Lord, but it wasn't what he wanted them to do.
The huge parallel there is God had set up the rock being struck. Jesus is pictured as the rock in Scripture. God had set up the rock being struck and giving forth your needs. The next time, it was just ask, because the rock has already been struck. Moses destroyed God's constructed analogy. Oops.
I think Mike had something, I interrupted.
Yes,
No,
Mike.
I'm in the New King James Version, and it says, I never knew you departing from me who practice lawlessness.
Exactly. Practice lawlessness.
Okay? And, we spend so much time, breaking down the scriptures to understand Christ, where he's coming from. And, he teaches us to follow his word, but if we don't do that, we're lawless, so to speak, right?
Exactly. Right.
And so then it goes on to say that I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on a rock, and then the rain.
We're not there
descends.
yet. Wait a minute.
Okay,
We're not there
sorry.
yet.
But it explains itself as it goes
As
on.
it goes along, exactly. I want to get back to who's Jesus talking to here. It could be those who are led astray. Could be the false prophets themselves. It could be those who are doing God's work, what they think is God's work, for their own self. I wrote the word aggrandizement. I don't know if I say it right. Their own self-elevation.
There are people who do that.
There are people who do that. Yes,
I find it,
Andrew.
there we go. So we just passed through the beware of false prophets, and it's not their garb that is the bad thing. The sheep's clothing is their inward part, and then it goes on to not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord.
Right.
So in that time, reading on through the scriptures, how I view it is the Pharisees and the scribes almost tick themselves off. Because at that time you have the Jews and the Gentiles were worshiping in the same place, the same God, the same scriptures, different view on the scriptures. And Christ is putting it all in order. They're following him to try and point out his wrong. Because a lot of the scriptures say
Exactly, because they're wanting to jump on him about his wrongs.
is contrary to the traditions of the elders.
Exactly.
And so one interesting thing going back to the garb of the false prophets is the wolf in this scenario is smart enough to put on what looks like a sheep to get in within the sheep. The description is ravenous, is extremely hungry, and that's what the wolf eats, is the sheep. So that's the intelligence of it to get within the group. And then have its way with the group, because it will have its way. There's no way that a sheep protects itself, as far as I know.
And those people have always been present throughout people's history. Go to the Old Testament, go to the New Testament. That's throughout Scripture, the warning there. is to watch out for them.
And then another scripture a lot later in Matthew 15. I'm not pulling it out of my head, so don't look at me like, that man is something else. I just read it. Where the scribes are talking to Christ, and he says, or they say, why do you teach your disciples, or why do the disciples contradict the traditions of the elders? And Christ said, why do you contradict the commandments of God?
Exactly.
When it says, honor your father and your mother, you have a son who says, what I have can help you, but what I have, I'm setting aside for God. But in the sense of, all he said is, it's set aside for God, but it's not necessarily given for God. And you, the elders, say that's okay, as long as your heart or not your heart. As long as they say it's set aside for God and not to help the parents, in which Jamar says a lot of if a man doesn't, see, that's what I remember.
Matthew chapter 23,
A man doesn't provide
the 7 woes.
If a man doesn't provide for his family, he's worse than an unbeliever.
Right. Right.
And so you'll see in that scenario what he can help for, what he has can help for his family. He's saying, no, I'm giving it to God. And God's saying, I never asked that.
Right. So I want you to take care of your family.
Yes.
Exactly. We'll continue on because we're getting short of time, and I want to finish a lesson for a change. All right, as Mike started getting us into the final warning Jesus gives is, heed my words. He who heeds my words is like the man who works to build his house properly. He who heeds my words is the man, we should know something, those of us who build around here, know something about foundations and soils and how you need to have a proper foundation if you expect your building to last here. The same in Palestine. He who works at building a proper foundation has the strength, builds the strength, the capacity to withstand the storms of life, to not be knocked off that narrow road, to stay with Jesus, to throw out the false teacher. He who does not work at it and takes the easy way, what happens? The house collapses. And great is the calamity. And what's the analogy mean? Your life has served no